Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Simply a Breeze. It is currently before 7 a.m. in my house, and so I'm talking a little quieter, and for that I apologize if you're having issues hearing me. So hopefully I can fix that in editing. But hello, my name is Bree, and if you're new here, I like to help people learn skills that I think are essential to being an adult. And the premise for all of this was I used to work with a lot of young adults who unfortunately just weren't prepared for the things that they would need to know once they became an adult. And that it hit me pretty hard, and so I'm here to just help guide and encourage and support you in furthering your knowledge and the things that you should be able to know and things that you should be able to do as a young adult. So today's video is something that I've been trying to figure out the best way to convey to you, but it's budgeting. And I'm not talking, you don't have to do anything ridiculous, but you should at a minimum know how much money you have coming in and what expenses do you have to pay for. Do you have enough money to cover rent? Do you have enough money to make your car payment? And do you have enough money to cover your essential bills like utilities, to make sure that you're eating and being able to buy food? So that's my reason for wanting to teach you and show you how to do a basic budget, because it can help you, one, find where you're overspending so you can gain a little bit money back if you cut back on your spending, but also it may help you realize that you have more money than you realized. You may also realize that you are overpaying somewhere, you're spending too much money somewhere, and so you may not necessarily be broke, you just aren't managing your money well. And that's actually one of my favorite things about a budget, is all it is a breakdown of the way that you're spending your money. A budget isn't restrictive necessarily because you're the one who makes it. You make the budget. If you have certain bills, that's because you have bills. That's on you. Your budget doesn't change that fact. It just shows everything to you. So I want to break down a budget that I had several years ago. This is a very, very old budget for me, but just to give you an idea of the things that you need to account for, things that you need to take into consideration, and it may be a good starting line for you to start your own budget. And a quick disclaimer, your budget may not look like mine. Your budget could be completely different, but there are certain things that are probably going to remain consistent, like you're going to have income generally. If you don't, then that's a whole different conversation. But you are going to have to pay for rent or for your mortgage. You're going to have to, if you have a vehicle, you're going to need to make the payment on that vehicle. If you don't own the vehicle outright, you're also going to need to pay for gas on that vehicle. You also are going to need to buy groceries. And the reason I said those things first is because those things give you shelter, transportation, food, and the utilities are going to keep lights on, so you have water and lights, okay? So I listed those first because those are essential. Those are going to make or break whether or not you're surviving. So I listed those items first. So like I said, the goal of the budget is so you know where all of your money is going. And that can be you telling it where it's going, or you know that there's specific bills that it needs to go towards. But regardless, you're just laying it all out so you can see the big picture. That's all a budget is, okay? So it's nothing incredibly complicated. It's you just writing everything down. So I'm going to start out with some basics for you. So these are the things that you need to take into consideration. And this is based off of a budget I had many years ago. I think it was like 4 years ago, okay? So again, your budget may look different. Your monetary amounts are definitely going to look different than mine. So here's the breakdown. Okay, so the first thing that you need to consider with your budget is your income. And so what I did was, for my income, I got paid this particular month. I knew I was getting paid 3 months. This is how much money I made. I actually made per paycheck, and I actually did my budget based off of a completely different number. I liked to take the average because I was paid hourly. I wasn't paid salary. Also, I, at the time, worked an internship. So I was getting that income as well. And I only got 2 paychecks for the internship because I got paid on the 1st and on the 15th. And I received And this was just extra money in my mind. I didn't actually know what this was going to be. Okay. So at the time of this paycheck, I worked a full-time job, I had an internship, and I was going to school full-time, or part-time, correction. And my internship was actually, this was just bonus money to me. This was just money that I either threw into savings or I used to pay down on my car payment, so I could lower how much I owed on my vehicle. And eventually I did end up getting it paid off. But my internship money I considered as just extra money because I was already making a living off of my full-time job, okay? But now I've broken down how much money I was making in a month, and that totaled $4,099.45 with my internship. So once that you account for your income, next you need to lay out your bills, your essential bills. So like your rent and your mortgage, your utilities, gas for your car payment, groceries, and because I have a cat, I put pet food. And I don't have any life-saving prescriptions, but if you had a life-saving prescription, I would put it here. And so then you would want to account for all of that as well. So at the time of this paycheck, my rent was $10.15. My utilities cost me $65.42. Gas for my car was relatively high because I lived in Colorado Springs and my internship was actually up in Denver. So I had to commute 3 days a week to Denver. And so I had to guesstimate how much it was going to cost me to drive there and back and how many times I could do it before I needed to fill up. So I had to do a little bit of math there, just so you guys are aware. My car payment was $342.78, and I tried as hard as I could to make sure I was only spending $150 on groceries. It was just me. I didn't have a roommate. I lived alone, so I did everything possible to keep my grocery bill low. And then obviously I had to feed my cat. If you're gonna own a pet, you need to make sure that you can afford to take care of your pet. And pets get expensive. They need food. They need to go to the vet. You need to get things like, if you have a dog, you need leashes and collars and harnesses for them. For cats, you need litter and a litter box. So the cost of maintaining and keeping that pet does add up. So I highly encourage you, before you consider getting a pet, make sure you can afford to take care of them, because if you can't afford to take care of them, what kind of life are you going to be able to give them if you can't afford to feed them? And then what kind of life are you going to have for yourself if you can't afford to, if you have to make a choice between feeding yourself or feeding your pet? You're doing a disservice to both of you. Once I know my income, or once I get an idea of what my income's going to be, I then take into account what rent, utilities, gas, my car payment, groceries, and food for my cat was going to be, because these were essential. This was going to make sure that I had food, shelter, a place to live. Okay. Anything else we can list afterwards, but I wanted to make sure that I could at least cover these essential things first. So moving on, we move on to your phone bill, which was $65.01. Internet, because I did work from home and I was going to school full-time, or part-time. Goodness, I was in school for a long time, guys. But so I needed to have internet to do school because it was online. Eating out. And I, at the time, worked in the food industry, so I got meals discounted, and that's generally what my eating out money was. And then if you have any monthly subscriptions, this is where you would put it. I didn't have any monthly subscriptions at the time of this, but like things like Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon, like movie streaming services and things you would want to take into account. More pet supplies. So this was like Boots's litter, my cat litter for my cat, my car insurance, and this was $0 because I pay in 6-month increments, so I don't have to pay my insurance every month, but I do pay a bigger chunk at one time. But that I chose that route to make sure that I just had it paid for and done with, and I didn't have to worry about it for a little bit. Credit card payments. What did I have on my credit card at the time? I had 107.23. I'm writing at an angle. I wasn't paying on student loans just yet, but if you are paying on your student loans, that's something you need to take into account as well. And then if you have like monthly prescriptions or anything like that, you should probably take that into account as well. Lastly, I'm adding these items because they don't necessarily fall into some sort of specific category, or they're not things that you're always paying for. They're things that just come up at random. And those are like this particular month I had my annual eye exam. I had to go to the dentist. I needed fun money so I could go out with my girlfriends, and I knew that I could afford to actually go out and hang out with them. And so for my eye exam, it was $29. The dentist was a little more expensive, as per usual. My fun money, I think I originally had budgeted $100 and I didn't spend it. And then I was saving for a tattoo, so that was $40. And then I had a category called miscellaneous. And in the miscellaneous category, I like to add things like toiletries, dental floss, toothpaste, feminine products, because you buy them regularly, but it's a little bit harder to plan when you're going to need them. So I don't necessarily always have to buy all of those things every month. So I just make sure in my miscellaneous category, I set an amount, and sometimes it's around like $75 for things like that come up. So I make sure that I'm not surprised that I have to spend money that's nowhere in my budget. So that's usually what I use my miscellaneous category for. And then lastly, and I say this last because is my savings. I used to put money into savings once I made sure I could pay for everything. And I know not everybody is going to agree with that. I know a lot of people prefer to make sure that they can put some sort of money into savings, especially for 401k purposes. So I changed the angle so you can actually see me talking. For your savings is I like to, anything that I have left over gets chucked into savings, because at one point in my life I was barely making ends meet, and so savings was just anything that was left over because I didn't have money. However, now later in life, I have changed my tone and my perspective, because I know I make enough to cover ends meet, is I do put a dedicated amount of money into savings every month, and I define that, and I put, this month I'm going to make sure I put at least this much money. And always make sure that you take the time to take care of yourself, okay? So set your future self up that way, is if you can afford to do it, I highly recommend, whether it's 1% or 2%, or if it's just like a hard and fast number that you like, and I'm going to throw one out there, just like you want to put away $500 every month, make sure that that is in your line item. $500 into savings is just non-negotiable. Put that into a non-negotiable, set that mindset, and then that's how that you can approach it as well. I also have a 401k, or it's not a 401k, but I have a retirement plan through my employer. And so that comes out of my paycheck every month. So, and that was the case with my full-time job as well during here, is I, at that time, had a 401k and that automatically came out. So the money that was listed here, the 401k was already taken care of. And so I already knew money was at least going into my retirement at that time. So, but this, it looks like a lot, but it's really not. These are everyday expenses that almost every individual has. So breaking it down and taking into account the way that you're spending your money is just essential for you, making sure you know where your money is going. I know far too many people who don't know what happened to their money, but they also don't budget. And I'm like, well, did you write it down? Did you look at it? Well, no, was always what I was told. So you have the time to make a budget. You have the resources to make a budget. You don't need any fancy special apps to do it. You don't need to pay buku bucks to have a budgeting app. You can use Excel. You can use Word. You can use a piece of paper. I used to write my budget out on a piece of paper all the time up until recently, okay? So you don't need any special tools. You need to know how much you make. And if you're hourly, let's go back to that. If you're hourly and your pay fluctuates, go ahead and base it off of what your lowest paycheck has been, or if you know how many hours you get, look to see how much you got paid for those hours, a previous paycheck, and go off of that. There are ways for you to estimate how much money you're going to make if you're an hourly employee. You can also take your hourly rate times the amount of hours you make. And if you can figure out what the general percentage is of what gets deducted from your paycheck because of federal taxes, state taxes, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, if you can calculate what that percentage is, do hours times hourly rate times the percentage of deductions that get removed from every single one of your paychecks, and you're going to get a general idea of how much money you're going to make. And I have found that to be relatively accurate within like $10 to $15 generally. Okay, so disclaimer, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't have a degree in money in any way, shape, or form, but I do know where my money is going. I do know how it's supposed to work, or I do know where my money is going, and I do know how I want my money to work for me. So I really hope that this gave you some clarification, a really good place to start, and a really good foundation for you doing your own budget. So here are a couple of questions that I thought of that I know some people have had before. And the first one is, what if my budget changes? Your budget's going to change. It always changes. I can set a budget. Every time I set a budget, I always have to go back and edit it. That's the nature of it. It's not set in stone. It is not a one and done type of deal. If your paycheck estimate, look, I estimated my paychecks to be around $950, and my third paycheck was lower, but my second and my first paycheck were all much higher than my original estimate. So I needed to update my budget to account for that. My utilities would fluctuate a little bit. So some days some months they were like around 60, and some months they were a little higher, around 70. It just depends on if I was running the heat more, if I was running the AC more, right? So I hit an average, and I always at the end, once I'm done assigning numbers, I would always make sure that I had money that didn't have an assignment as a buffer. So that way, if I needed to adjust my numbers, I could, because the numbers are going to fluctuate. That's just the nature of the way things are nowadays. Eating out, unless I set a hard and fast number, just because I didn't want to spend more than that number. However, if near the end of the month you notice you spent even less, if you want, yeah, you can go eat more. But then I was like, oh my gosh, I have extra money to throw into savings, or I have extra money to throw at my car payment, stuff like that. Groceries, I tried to set a hard and fast number, but sometimes you do go over depending on if you have dietary needs and stuff like that. So that, yes, go back and edit your budget, because it's not going to be, once you write it out, it's not going to stay that way the whole month. It changes. It 100% does. So I highly recommend going back at least once a week, checking your budget, updating your budget, making sure you've accounted for all of your expenses. Another thing is, can anything go in the budget? And the answer is yes. If you're going to be spending any of your money on something, it goes in the budget. And like, it can belong in the miscellaneous category. It could be something that you don't buy often, but all of a sudden, like, you need it. Throw it in the miscellaneous category and make sure you put a note on what it is or something. But yes, if you're going to spend your money on it, it needs to be in your budget. And that's more so you know what you spent your money on. So I hope you found this budget helpful. If you are somebody who has a tight budget and you are looking for options to cook meals on a budget and how you need to grocery shop, I highly recommend you go check out Tory Patton at Mountain Mama Living, and she also has a YouTube channel, Tory Patton, as well. I will link them both down below for you to go check her out. She is great at doing things on a budget, to include being prepared for storms that are coming our way, on top of a whole bunch of other stuff, and she does it with 3 kiddos, so she's pretty impressive there. So I highly recommend you go check her out. I do think she watches this channel, so if you're watching this, hey Tory. So I wanted to put that little blurb out there and let you guys know that that is also an option. And then also, I will be linking the free tool that I use to create my budget every month. There is a free version and then there's a paid version, and it's through Dave Ramsey, Ramsey Solutions, and I like a lot of his philosophies and thought processes on the way money should work. Go ahead and hit that link down below as well. It's not sponsored. I just think it's a valuable tool, and it'll also have a pre-set up budget for you to fill out as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great day. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you like this kind of content. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.